Good clip on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just putting it under my shirt. I don't know why. I like it better under my shirt. Hey guys, if you're listening to the podcast, if they're hearing this, they're obviously listening to the podcast, right? Right? If you're enjoying this podcast or you just want to support the podcast, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, turn on the notifications. Thank you for the support. This podcast is brought to you by our friends at Sorensen's Ace Hardware, located at 402 Washington Avenue in Los Banos. Proudly serving the community since 1947. Please check out our friend at Sorensen's for all your hardware needs. Come on, guys, support those who support us. Thanks, Sorensen's. Sorensen's also has a Modesto location located at 1433 Coffee Road. Modesto, true value for all your hardware needs. For all of our people out in the Modesto area, please support those who support us. Thank you.
You gotta get uncomfortable to get comfort.
There's some help. It ain't on the way. It's already waiting for you.
This little pill right here could take over your life. And I found that out the hard way. Mission statement of this podcast highlights stories of people that I've met in my journey in recovery. Right? Like my thought process automatically goes to like what qualifies me to sit here and speak. I guess it's self-deprecating, right? Like, because I don't know where people get off, like sitting in front of a fucking camera talking, right? Like this isn't right. Like, so like for me, this is weird, right? But we could roll with it. So, anyways, but I don't know. So I guess we'll get right into it, man. Like NSA with EJ, right? Here I am. I don't know. On my mind lately, like the last couple weeks, I've been thinking about like what it took to get clean, you know, because I do have a couple clean dates, right? I've tried and I've failed before, and so far I got a little over 7 years of continuous clean time, you know, and what the difference was, you know, I mean, the difference was my willingness, you know, and my desire to get and stay clean, right? But I really just got done watching a TV show, and it was like, it's been a hot topic on my brain, right? I got done watching Dope Sick, right? And for me, like that was like my drug of choice, right? The first time I got clean, you know, and I enjoyed watching the show, number one, just to see the history of that drug, and it's at the end, it's kind of disappointing because you want to see those people get held accountable for what they did, right? For releasing a drug like that on the market and mislabeling it. But the problem I had with the show is it's like, you know, it's like showing people getting hooked on Oxycontin. It's showing people use Oxycontin. And at a certain point in the show, it makes it look like it's impossible to get clean and stay clean, right? All it's showing is people like dying, which is the truth. That's what happens, right? And it's also showing, like at the very end, like the swan song was that like one of the main characters found Suboxone, right? And got clean using what they call maintenance therapy, or like, you know, and like that's not my story, right? Like I kicked cold turkey, right? Got clean for a little while, decided to go back out, and was stuck on opiates again. And at no time in my story did I ever use like methadone or Suboxone, right? Like I went through withdrawals cold turkey, right? I went to a program, got involved with a 12-step program, and got clean and stayed clean, right? And for me, like I cherish those memories, right? Like I cherish my detox. I cherish the pain that I went through, right? And for me, that stuff keeps me clean, right? Because I don't know if I would want to go through that ever again, right? And I think a lot of times people that get clean with maintenance therapy rob themselves of going through, I guess, a rebirth in a way, you know, realizing that the drugs they were using were so toxic that you have to go through this pain in order to get clean, right? And those memories of my, not only my withdrawals, but my detox, that kind of stuff keeps me clean, right? Like I don't ever want to go through that again, like being locked in a room, almost like wishing for death at certain points because the pain is just nonstop, right? And so as well as I hold the memory of the last time I used, I hold that dear to my heart, right? The using against my own free will, right? I can remember not being at home because the people that lived in my home didn't want me in my home, right? For just reasons. And I remember like wanting to get clean and the solution already being introduced to me, right? I was going to 12-step meetings and I was lying about clean time and I was there just in the mess, and I had reached out to somebody who introduced the solution, right? They were coming to pick me up the next day to take me to not only have a safe place to get clean, but introduce me into a long-term residential program. And I remember not wanting to use the drugs, right? And I remember going to the drugs. I remember, putting the pills in my mouth. I remember spitting the pills out on the ground. I remember picking them up off the ground, putting them back in my mouth, crying and using these drugs against my own free will, right? I just couldn't stop at that point, and like I share that with you guys for what reason, I don't know. But I keep that for me because that keeps me strong, right? It reminds me that once I decide, because today I have a choice, right? If I decide to pick up and use, I might not decide when I get to stop using, right? I like to use the analogy, like a roller coaster is really fun until you can't decide when to get off, right? And that's my using experience, because there was a long period of time where I enjoyed, drinking and using, and I was able to do it, and it didn't completely, in my mind at the time, make my life unmanageable, right? But like where I hang out, they break down the disease of addiction, as an obsessive compulsive disorder, and total self-centeredness being the crutch behind it, right? And once I pick up and use, it's almost in an obsessive compulsive manner where I just can't stop, right? Man, and drugs are just the beginning, right? Like the behaviors that go along with it. We suffer from a disease that's spiritual in nature, right? And we suffer from a disease of more, where I want more, right? And that could be drugs, that could be sex, that could be gambling, that could be food, right? And it's funny, like the further I get away from these types of behaviors, the easier it is to abstain from these types of behaviors, right? Do I still get thoughts? Yes, I get thoughts, right? Like we talk about like character defects as far as like selfishness, manipulation, all these different things that we can suffer from, and the less I practice in those behaviors, or the less I entertain those thoughts, the more of a chance I have from them becoming like a shortcoming. The shortcoming would be the acting out on said behavior. But like I don't know really where I'm going with this, but like it's impossible to get off a drug using another drug, right? And that was kind of like where I started with this, was watching this series, and the solution for the drugs they were showing was another drug, right? But it's impossible to get clean off of drugs while using another drug, right? But there's lots of people that also seek help in other manners, right? Whether they have like a chemical disorder and they seek a physician and they take things to stay balanced, and that's completely a different thing. But I'm here to tell you that you can stop using cold turkey, with the help of others, and get plugged into whether it's a treatment facility or a 12-step fellowship, and stay clean, right? Like you don't ever have to use anything ever again. And for me, like that's freedom. right? And we often talk about, one day at a time, because like for me, sometimes to make a life decision and say, hey, you know what, I'm never going to use again. Like that's heavy. Like that's huge, right? Like that bears a lot of weight. But I can wake up this morning and say, I'm not going to use today, right? And that makes it a little bit easier to deal with. I'm just going to worry about today, or I'll tell myself, maybe I'll get loaded tomorrow, but today I'm going to stay clean, right? Or, and that makes it manageable, right? Like it was funny, like when I first got clean, like the city I got clean in, there was a lot of people that would say like, yeah, if I do, everything it says, I never have to get loaded again, which is true, right? But like that's heavy, right? For the person that's out there and they're just trying to scrape a couple of days together to talk about forever, it is overwhelming, and the more time I put together, the more empathetic I get to the ones that do go out and have to come back in, like that.
8 to 12% chance that a person getting into recovery is gonna get recovered.
Right, or stay in recovery.
8% to 12%.
Right, and it's funny because when I went to treatment, like we had these introduction classes, and I remember the guy up there was like, 1% stays clean, right? And the way I was back then, I was so desperate. Like I looked around the room and I'm like, I guess all you guys are fucked because I'm staying clean, right? Like, and that was my mentality, right? Like I walked into treatment, only worried about myself, right? Like I'm here for me. I walked in alone. I'm going to walk out alone, right? Like that was my mentality, right? And today it's changed, right? Like it's softened up a lot. And like, I don't believe in those odds either. I mean, statistically, that's what they say. But if you have a group of people that are all willing and open-minded and honest to themselves, right? They carry those three traits. Anybody can stay clean, right? Like there's nothing special about me that allowed me to put together 7 years of clean time, right? And I plan on staying clean to the day I die, but today I'll worry about today, right? But there's nothing special about me, right? There's nothing, that's bullshit too, because people that put together long periods of clean time, like we've sat and talked to people that had like 46 years, 48 years of clean time. That's fucking special, right? Like that gives people that are barely getting clean hope, right? Like those are special people, but they'll sit down and they'll tell you, there's nothing special about what I did. I just decided to stay clean for today, right? And that's a whole bunch of no matter what's, through death, through divorce, through financial burden, through unforeseen life events. People just decide to stay clean, right? And anybody can do it, right? And it starts with, number one, like realizing that you have a problem, right? And reaching out and asking for help. Because like that's the hardest thing to do, really, for somebody that's out there struggling and with a disease that doesn't want to be found out, right? Like, because the only diagnosis for addiction is self-diagnosis, in my opinion, right? Like, you can only get to the bottom of it when you decide that you've had enough. And it's funny, like sitting here, like doing this, like I by no means am an expert on addiction, but all I can do is talk about my real life experience, right? And a lot of times I feel like I don't qualify as an addict, right? Like, but my life experience tells me otherwise, right? And that's the disease working in my mind. It wants to separate me from the pack and make me feel unique and special. Isn't that bad? And all I have to do is go back and reflect on those times, the times before I went to treatment, the times that I was locked in that room, going through detox, right? And remember what it felt like to get that gift of desperation that we often talk about, and the gift of desperation, it doesn't feel like a gift when you're getting it, right? It's usually that event or that series of events that jar you into a new way of life, right? And like for me, it was a difficult period in my life, where I ended up by myself, right? And and it was funny, and I think that's why it stuck this time, is because I actually had something to lose, right? When I was younger, I never envisioned myself as an older person. I always would visualize my funeral, right? I didn't think I was going to live past 40, and that's what I thought life was for me. It was, I was going to go out using, man, and it took that gift of desperation of my wife and kids leaving me, to realize that I needed to make some changes, right? I did have some things in my life that I valued more than myself at that point, because my general well-being wasn't a top priority for me. I was probably 110 pounds soaking wet. Looked like I was on death's door. But as far as I was concerned, I was just fine, right? Everybody else had the problems, right? And all the stuff I was doing behind my wife's back, all the drugs I was selling, the drugs I was doing, that was just normalized behavior at that point. And it took something jarring enough for me to realize that this is my bottom, right? And your bottom is when you've decided you've had enough, right? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be homeless under a bridge. You don't have to be, ODing 3, 4, 5 times for you to have a bottom. Everybody's bottom's different, and without that gift of desperation, which at that time, it really didn't feel like a gift, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, and thank God, most of those things in my life have been restored. And that's the stuff that I struggle with today, right? Is keeping in mind where I was, right? If we forget our history, we're bound to repeat things. And I don't ever want to go to those lengths again. I sometimes play with the ideas of doing as other people do, right? Like, oh, maybe I could drink like a gentleman, right? Or maybe I could just smoke weed here or there. But all I have to do is play the tape out, right? And know, for an addict like me, once I pick up, I don't get to decide when I stop, right? It takes an intervention by God to get an addict clean, and I don't know, man. I know I have another relapse in me. I don't know if I have another recovery, right? I don't know if I have what it takes to get clean again, because that's not an easy process, right? It's not an easy process, admitting that you failed, right? And that you can't do it by yourself, right? And on a daily basis, I try to remind myself that I don't do this thing by myself, right? I have a great group of people that support me, right? This project that we've been doing, this podcast, this Not So Anonymous podcast, like, has been a blessing in my life. I've been able to reaffirm a lot of friendships, and connect with a lot of people, and sit down and talk with people about, and get in depth with what it was like, and what it's like now. And it reminds me that I don't ever want to go back there again, right? And staying plugged in with the fellowship and trying to recover on a daily basis. In recovery for me, it's like a three-pronged thing, right? There's the physical aspect, which I think a lot of people in recovery ignore, like the exercise and all those things that are the remedy to a lot of my issues, right? And then I have the mental aspect, which is the program, the 12-step program. And then I have the spiritual aspect, which is, the connection with my higher power and the prayer. And at any given time, I'm likely to fall short on one of those things, right? And it'll come up in my life. Things will get unmanageable. I'll get unmanageable. And communication becomes difficult. Daily tasks become difficult. My relationships with others get strained, right? And so it's very apparent to me that I struggle with this disease every day, right? Whether or not it's apparent to me on a day-to-day basis, that's something that I struggle with. And that's why it's important to have people in my life that are willing to pull my covers and tell me, hey man, I think you're slipping, right? So I'm, and I'm still a baby in this stuff, and I struggle with this, right? With like sitting in front of a camera and talking about my life experience, right? Like what qualifies me to do this, right? Like why is my story important? And I got to remember that's the disease talking, right? Just trying to remain on the path, is it's difficult and sometimes it's not. I'm just super grateful to be able to, I'm losing my fucking train of thought, Jesse, to be honest with you. I'm like fucking babbling on and on in front of this fucking camera and I feel like I'm losing my goddamn mind, right? Like, what the fuck? Thank God you can edit that out or not. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's, recovery, and I'm not jaded enough to sit here today and say that the way that I'm doing it is the only way to do it, right? But there's thousands and thousands of addicts, that can attest that finding the 12-step fellowship and doing the things that are suggested will not only get you clean, but they can keep you clean for your whole life if you choose to give yourself to the program, right? I've met so many people on this journey that, like just interviewing, like talking, the interview we did the other day, with my friend William, man, like just listening to his story, in the depths that this addiction can take you to and how hard you could bounce back and what an amazing individual that person is, right? Or sitting with Claude and talking to him, and with his like 46 years, or, John with his 48, or, sitting there talking to people like my friends Henry and Daryl and my brother Ernie. And I've met some of the most amazing, talented people in recovery, right? And these are all people that society would have written off a long time ago, right? Like, if it wasn't for, the program, the 12-step fellowship, man, we'd have been written off by everybody. So like if you're listening to this, and you're struggling, whether you're in your addiction or you're in recovery, just don't give up, man. Don't be afraid to ask for help, right? Don't be afraid to ask for help if you're out there and you're in your disease and you're using right now, or even if you have 7, 10, 20 years clean, man, we all come to a point in life where we just need help,